All right, can you see what I'm doing here?
I
Let's boom.
see. You got my website up there. Very cool.
Yeah, I've put a lot of effort into this building, mate. I bought this building back in March so that I could get into this, and I realized very quickly I was putting a lot of obstacles in front of myself, so I didn't have to do what I'm doing right now, which is talking to you. Um,
I have to
so
introduce you to Todd Urey. Todd is the founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network for about
yeah.
11 years. He just built a studio like you have right here in Pittsburgh, and I think the two of you would be BFFs. I think
Oh
you are
yeah.
right that you can connect the dots from Australia to the United States and connect to the entire pharmacy vertical market, because that's what he does.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting. What was his name?
Todd Urey, Eury, the man,
Eury.
the myth, the legend, Todd Urey.
Very cool. All right. So as I said in the in the email I sent you about like some topics we could go over, I think your story is going to be really interesting for Australia, for the Australian market, because as I said yesterday, we have regulations in place. Only a pharmacist can buy a pharmacy, and they can only own five per state. And that's sort of over the last 20 years, the early adopters have kind of sort of really scrapped the discount model and are moving towards the forward-facing or we call it forward-facing or front pharmacy, where you sit down with a pharmacist, you have a consult. Um, so that we've been forced into that, and which is a good thing in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions. But even in the U.S. market, you've kind of organically gotten to that point where it's required without the regulations. So I think that's really interesting and speaks to how valuable that interaction is. So would it be okay by you, Ken, if we went through your story again? As I said, I was been renovating this building and I was listening to your podcast while I was doing our floors with those two girls. I think it was in California.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, so could you go through the story of how you got to be where you are? It's very interesting.
No, I'd love that, and thank you for the opportunity. When you can tell a story that resonates with you personally and then professionally, telling that story really is the best thing about it. I mean, it was a journey that I took that started when I was actually 9 years old, when I visited my father at a pharmacy in Jamaica, New York. He was a pharmacist and owned a store called Merrick Pharmacy, and it was your independent community drugstore, and he had been there for, I don't know, 40, 50 years, way before I was born. And he was serving the community as doc. When people would come in to meet with him, he was there in his white jacket, and
Yeah,
people in the community came to the pharmacist before they went to the doctor in those days. He was the trusted person. When I say he, actually in those days, the pharmacy profession was dominated by men. There were no women in
right.
pharmacy. So my father took me to work one day, many days, and it was great for me to see people talking to my father, getting the help that they needed, and having people show respect and really love for the fact that he cared about them. He cared about their families. He knew the people by name, and he really was a trusted healthcare provider. Now, I got a chance to learn how to make chocolate egg creams and cherry lime brickies and sell pretzel rods for a penny, and I got to take a toy home every day. But it really made me think when I got into pharmacy school in 2000, 1970, I guess 71, 72,
Right.
that I wanted to be what my dad was. And I wanted to be that trusted care provider. Sadly, he passed away in my first semester at St. John's, but I carry the image and the vision of being Doc with me in everything I do. And that
Can
really is,
can
go
you
ahead.
go into that a little bit more? Like, because I'm business partners with a second generation pharmacist. Some of my first clients are second generation pharmacists. I meet a lot of second generation pharmacists. What do you think is, I've asked them this too, but what do you think is the appeal? Like, you said you saw your dad as the doc, and the community saw as the doc. What's the appeal to being a second generation pharmacist?
Well, the appeal always for me, and I think is still for pharmacists who are entering our profession, is that you can help people. And just looking, I don't know, I don't see myself on the screen, but that doesn't matter. I
I can
guess
see
you.
you.
Okay.
You're good.
Well, what you do is basically you want to help people. And I know that's why I went to pharmacy school, because I know my dad was helping people. And people, when you help people, you really are helping yourself. So I wanted to help people. I wanted to be a nice guy who helped people. And
Mm,
that to me defined what a pharmacist did and what a pharmacist should do every day, whether you're a first generation, second generation, or the next generation of pharmacists who are being graduated in droves right now. You
right.
should care about the patient. And that's what I did. I always felt I was working for the patient because the patient needed my care, needed my help. And that's really why I do what I do. And that's why I love doing what I do.
So I interrupted you there to go into, the admiration and the reverence for the profession. But you started going into school. Your dad unfortunately passed away your first semester, and then
Well, when I graduated from St. John's, there weren't too many options for a pharmacist as there are today. Those options included going into an independent pharmacy, going and working with someone who maybe wanted a second store or was going to retire, and you would buy into that store, or you worked in a hospital pharmacy. And
mm,
hospital pharmacy then in the 70s was nowhere near it is now with grand rounds and infusion. It was in the basement in a small little cubby hole, putting pills into little Dixie cups that the nurses could carry around. And the third option for me at that time was ROTC in the VA and the military. And I chose independent community pharmacy because I felt that's where my bloodlines were. But sadly, when I graduated, the company I was working for, the store, not a company, the store I was working for couldn't find a second store. So no matter how much he tried to look for a second store for me to be his partner, he kept coming back and telling me, no, this one's not right, this one's not right. So finally I said to him, I guess one day you don't want a partner. So I'm going to just look for something else to do. And
mm.
as a registered pharmacist in 1979, I left the profession for 27 years because the
Right.
profession, yeah, I took a long lunch break
Yeah,
for
yeah.
27 years. And I went to work for my father-in-law in consumer electronics. And during that summer leading up to that pretty monumental change, didn't make my mother very happy because she didn't really want me to be a salesperson. She thought that that was one level above child molester. She
Oh,
wanted me to be a professional, doctor or a pharmacist or
that's rough.
a healthcare professional. I said, Mom, I need to be happy and I want to do this. And she said, okay, still always had a little bit of a negative to it. But I went to work in an environment that I was also helping people, but they weren't in the healthcare industry. I was educating. I was talking to them.
So when you say consumer electronics, I've heard your story two or three times now, and you always say consumer electronics. And we're at a funny point in human history where saying electronics can induce a sense of nostalgia, like
Yes.
where I'm like, it's like a Tamagotchi. But what consumer electronics? Like what are you selling? Game Boys? What were you
Well,
in a
interesting you say
light
that.
set?
My
Yeah.
father-in-law, who's another mentor for me, his name was Bernie Ton. Bernie sold the first cassette deck in the world by Philips Norelco. So we were selling cassettes. We were selling products from Sony and a company called Iowa. We sold the world's first recording Walkman. Maybe if you remember the Walkman, it was
Oh yeah.
something you put on your head and you played cassettes.
Yeah.
When you think about all the changes in media and in consumer electronics, all the iPads, the discs, the laser discs. I mean, we sold them all, but the thing that never has changed in its format is the cassette. It's really amazing. In 1964, when my father-in-law sold the world's first cassette, recorder from Philips, I mean, nobody uses them anymore, but it's amazing that that still remains. So in consumer electronics, we sold home theater products. flat screen televisions. We sold Game Boys. We sold
Right.
computers. We sold car audio. We sold accessories, loudspeakers, anything that enhanced the life of the patient, of the customer. We sold.
So this is a retail shop, like you're in front of
No,
shop retail? No?
we were manufacturers' representatives for
Mm.
some of the largest consumer electronics companies in the world. Companies like Yamaha Electronics, companies like Iowa, which was a company owned by Sony, Panasonic, Sharp Vision, Mitsubishi. So we were independent manufacturers' representatives. We didn't stock any inventory. Weren't a distributor. We would go to retailers to say, would you like to purchase Yamaha receivers because it's the best brand? And here's
Mm.
why. And they
Mm.
would say yes or they would say no. And we would then solicit those orders, train those individuals, and the company, Yamaha, would ship the merchandise, bill them, and when they got paid, we got a commission. So
So
we were
that's
commission
interesting. You
salespeople.
you you went like pharmacy's like very intimate, right? With when you're talking right to the customer, and now you're moving backwards a step to deal with the retailer as a supplier. Like in terms of like if you were to sort of copy paste that into the pharmaceutical industry, you're being removed from the client, and now you're helping the business rather than helping the end user. Is that
It is. It is actually with the independent pharmacies in the United States struggling and challenging. I view them as people we can help by
mm,
getting to know them, by going back and saying, hey, there are clinical services that you can introduce into your business that will kind of help you stay alive. Because if you just keep counting pills and then that's all you do, A, you can be replaced by a machine, and B, the cost compression and the business model, unless you are the biggest and the biggest and the biggest, you're going to get crushed. And in the United States, the independent pharmacy, my dad's model, is being crushed. Hundreds of stores close every single year.
right? Yeah, I saw that the market, Australia's a much smaller market, obviously, but comparatively, I think we got about 4 or 5 thousand community pharmacies or independent pharmacies, and I think there's 15 times the population in the US, but there's still only 20,000 independent pharmacies in the US. I didn't even know they were here. I moved here when I was 19. I've gone backwards and forwards, but I didn't know they existed.
They do. The
Yeah,
independent pharmacy location, my dad's model, hasn't gone away. It's continued to be challenged, but you're right. There are upwards of 20, I think it's 28,000 of independent pharmacy locations, and this does not count the CVSs and the Walgreens and the big box retailers. We're
right.
talking about the mom and pops who are the backbone, in my opinion, of the healthcare industry. These are the people who have put decades of blood, sweat, and tears into their communities to serve their patients. And we need to do something to keep them alive because every corner cannot be filled with the big box retailer. It's
Yeah,
just
so
it's wrong.
so this is why I think your situation is so interesting to the Australian market. Um, but yeah, so you're in consumer electronics. Let's finish your story and get to what you're doing now.
Well,
But you,
my story never finishes. I tell my children, I was up, I was up in Boston over the weekend visiting my grandkids, and we were all together. It was the first time we've all been together, nine of us. I have two daughters and son-in-laws, and I have three going on four grandchildren, and of course my wife. And we were all together. And I say to the kids, they want to know what I'm doing, and they try and, what's new, Dad? What's up? And I say, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I still don't.
yeah,
It's an evolving process. I'm still learning. I'm educating. I'm listening. God gave me two ears and one mouth. I talk a lot on podcasts and I give perspectives and things and move things forward. But if you're not listening and you're not learning, the story continues. So back to St. John's and
right,
working for my father-in-law.
yeah.
I really didn't practice as a pharmacist from the time I got licensed in 1979 until 2007 when I realized that all the consumer accounts that I was selling had gone out of business. And I
Mm,
didn't have any more clients. There was a dearth of clients, people like Best Buy, Worst Buy, Circuit City, The Wiz, Macy's, anyone who you were thinking that you could sell was struggling and went out of business. So I realized that there were no more customers for me to sell. So I went back to school. My license had expired. I didn't keep it up. So I went back and sat next to students who were a third of my age, half my age, and studied again to get a whole year, had to get 46 credits to get my license reinstated because I didn't keep it up. I was working
Yeah.
with my father-in-law and with a very successful business model. And I went back to school when I was 50 plus years old.
So you've got like a really good, you got pretty, I guess, reasonably solid memories of the two versions of the education. What changed between those times?
Oh, what didn't change?
Yeah.
We went from brand to generic. So when I walked back into the store, all of the drugs that I remembered weren't there, but they were there with different names. I had to
Mm.
take out my index cards again, like I was studying when I was 20 years old, and write the name of the generic and then the name of the brand on the other side on the flip card. I literally went back to school for myself. I had to learn what those drugs were. You know,
Mm.
Synthroid, I knew. Levothyroxine, I didn't know. So I had to assimilate to the generics that were there. I also had to assimilate to technology. Obviously, I went back into as a CDS pharmacist. That's where I got hired. And of course, their systems they weren't challenging because I never let them be challenging. I never let technology systems limit my ability to speak to a patient. No matter what my manager ever told me about metrics or business, I always felt the business would succeed based on me developing a relationship with the patient. And that's what I did. And I bothered them no end. They couldn't figure me out. All they wanted me to do was copy and paste what they did in their corporate offices to say, this is what works. I said, okay, I'm a good guy. I'll follow the rule. But at the end of the day, as a pharmacist, I have to be the best pharmacist I can be, not the best pharmacist you think you want to make me. And despite that, I'll say, attitude, it wasn't an attitude, it was just a position that I took as being the best pharmacist I could be, I became a Paragon winner, which was their top award 2 years in a row, and in their emerging leader. And I think it bothered them because I was non-traditional. I
Mm.
focused on the patient, and that's what I did. And my staff was told to focus on the patient. Don't focus on the number. The number will come.
Right.
The business of pharmacy follows the profession of pharmacy. If you think of the business first, you lose sight of the profession. The profession is to help the patient at all costs.
And this is something that I think, as somebody who did and is a sales trainer, and I've got a sales training company, I really don't think, based on my own experience, that people who aren't pharmacists, including doctors, really appreciate that precarious balance between retail and healthcare. I think that is, you're really doing two jobs. You've got two professions. You're balancing two different industries, and the the ethical concern, like how high that is on a pharmacist's agenda, I think is so uncelebrated and unappreciated. And one of the things that I've noticed with sales trainers, they want to teach a pharmacist sales skills. And this is in the Australian model. And I'm like, or they want to say, well, we'll do a cultural change project where we can change your culture to really embody sales. And I'm like, yeah, uh, that could work. But when you go into the field and you try and teach these methods, they hate it because they're at a level of where we don't need to do sales. We need to provide the best information to the patient, and then the patient does the sales. The patient makes the sale decision or the monetary decision. Our job is to provide the best care that we can, and then we let them. So anyway, I wanted to like express my reverence for pharmacists straddling, putting one foot in each camp is really something.
Well,
It's
well,
really something that's.
well, thank you, and we thank you for that because it really is important that people understand what a pharmacist really is. That pharmacist is seen as someone at fast food pharmacy sticking their head out the window at a drive-through window telling them to move the car forward, when that person spent 5, 6 or more years studying their craft as medication experts and really can't practice at the height of their license or diploma in the work environments that we're put into. There's nothing wrong with a retail environment, but it's a dispensing environment that has workflow challenges that preclude, limit, and diminish the fact that consultation cannot be done in that environment. You
Right.
cannot possibly do a meaningful consultation with 16 phones ringing, doing flu shots, running around, taking the blue bag and the green bag garbage out, managing your staff, and then having a supervisor come in to say, why are your numbers going down?
Yeah.
They don't realize that the customer is not being served correctly in that environment.
Right. So you've gone into CVS, you're winning some awards. What's next?
Well, while I was at CVS, sadly, my father-in-law now, my second mentor, Bernie, passed away about 5 years ago this October. And I was clinically depressed. He was obviously the person who he hadn't replaced my father, but when my father died when I was 21 years old, I had another 40 years, with my father-in-law, who I worked with, who I played sports with, who was my mentor, who I looked to as the great father, the great husband, the great, everything about him was my life. And when I lost him, I had a huge void to fill. And I'm looking at the screen behind you where it comes up with chronic care management. Sadly, he was, stricken with an adverse drug reaction, which didn't kill him, but it caused some tremendous problems for him. And then I needed to find chronic care management solutions to take care of my father-in-law because I needed to be there for him in the latter part of his life. So I studied and found that there were ways that people could offer care, compassion, and empathy, as services to help people who were struggling with chronic diseases. And that's how I started to learn about the tools that are available that nobody knows about, for patients to take care of them, to help with their care coordination, to do a pharmacogenetic test to avoid an adverse drug reaction. So I became a student of care. I looked for everything I could possibly find to help my father-in-law. And it wasn't enough. And I lost him. So when I lost him, I went to my doctor. I was clinically depressed. I didn't want to get up in the morning to go to work to CVS. I didn't care because I had lost such a big part of my life. And I sat with him, and he was a concierge physician, is a concierge physician. So he took the time to listen to me. And he heard my pain. He felt my pain. And together, we dealt with it. And I said to him, Michael Goodman, I said, Michael, when I grow up, I want to do what you do. I want to help people. You're helping me.
Right.
So I'm at CVS 46 hours a week. Okay, it's very difficult. Nada, I'm too old. They want to get rid of me. No matter how many awards I win, or whatever. Went out on medical leave. I had some surgeries, hip replacements, knee replacements. I'm not their cup of tea because they want someone younger who they can just beat the crap out of.
Right.
I said, let me come here on Fridays and help patients. Let me come here. You don't have to pay me. And that's how the company that's behind you, RXVIP Concierge, was
So that's
born.
to Michael, the GP, right? Not the
Michael
CVS.
Goodman is a general practitioner and internist who's been my doctor and my family's doctor for 30 years. He transitioned to a concierge physician about 15 years ago. He used to have a practice with 2,500, 3,000 patients. You had to wait 3 days to get an appointment, and his waiting room was always filled. He was practicing fast food medicine. But
Right.
he made a decision to go in a more personalized concierge approach to healthcare and was one of the first concierge physicians on Long Island.
Can you explain a little bit, like just the terminology might get lost in translation between here and Australia. What does concierge mean here?
A concierge physician has made a decision to limit the amount of patients in their practice. Generally, it's about 600, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And they have an opportunity to spend more time with each patient. Now, there is a cost associated with that. look at it as almost like a membership
Yeah.
club. All right. So in addition, you're paying for personalized care. You're paying for the full access 24/7 to a healthcare provider. But you're really, it's not like a health club membership because at the end of the day, these people can't afford not to have personalized healthcare. So my wife, who was the one who made the decision to go with, when Michael switched over, she said, we can't afford not to have that personalized care as we need it. So it wasn't, it was a decision. Do I want to pay for cable and a couple more HBO channels, or do I want to pay to keep my wife and myself healthy, so we can be around for the wonderful events that our children and grandchildren will have? And it was an easy decision.
Right.
You make a decision on what you're investing in, and I needed to invest in my health.
So, does that circumvent? Well, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of Obamacare, but does that circumvent the requirement for insurance?
No, there are
Oh.
concierge physicians who take insurance
Mm.
as well, Medicare or commercial insurances, etc. And there are concierge physicians who are completely cash pay, no insurance. The insurance issues here in the United States, they are the devil. And
Yeah.
many physicians have decided they don't want to deal with the devil anymore. So they
Right.
have gone to completely cash pay models. Dr. Goodman has not. He's what I call a hybrid. So I give him my insurance. And again, I'm still part of his concierge, group. I'm part of his members. And that's something that I've chosen is kind of that extra level of care that I need.
Right. So you've volunteered to work with Dr. Michael on Fridays. You come in. What does your day look like when you first started out?
Well, Pharmacy Friday was really pretty cool. The first thing what he did was he introduced me, and we had kind of a Meet the Pharmacist event because nobody really expects to see a pharmacist in a doctor's office. I mean, it's like kind of it's a paradigm shift. You expect to see a pharmacist in a pharmacy and a doctor in a doctor's office and a nurse or whatever. You expect them to be where they should be. So Dr. Goodman introduced us. We had a Meet the Pharmacist event, and he said, Kenny, don't be upset if nobody comes to the event. I've done events for diabetes, for chronic, for heart disease, for wellness, for this, for that. And you get a couple of people who maybe have nothing better to do, and they show up for coffee and a donut. So I said, well, let me think about the topic that would resonate with more people. He says, okay, Ken, whatever you want. Here's the list. You can call all the patients. We printed up flyers. We handed them out. And I said the topic should be saving money on prescription medication, because that's the chronic disease we all have in the United States. We can't afford our medications.
Mm.
So if the pharmacist is offering an opportunity to offer tips and resources for saving money on prescription medication, let's see who shows up. And we filled the room 4 times. Okay, we saw 33, almost 36% of his patients in one day. And it was amazing. And they started fighting for the appointment, the 9 o'clock appointment, to sit with the pharmacist starting the next Friday. And 3 weeks later, I was seeing more patients at the practice than Dr. Goodman saw on a Friday. So we knew the solution worked. And that's
Right.
how Pharmacy Friday started.
Yeah. Okay. So, and how long have you been doing this? This was
Well, actually tomorrow I'll be there again. I do it, and I've done it for. We started on August. Actually, it's 4 years. 4 years, 5 years. It's 4 years this week. Our first event, our Meet the Pharmacist event, was August 23rd, 2014. So
congratulations.
it's a 5-year anniversary. Maybe Dr. Goodman will buy me a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Oh, congratulations. So you've been doing this, and this is a 5-year anniversary tomorrow. Again, congrats. And now you're reaching out to other pharmacists to kind of, graduating pharmacists, right, to do something similar?
Well, any pharmacist who
Mm.
wants to advance his or her career. And I didn't initially reach out to them. What I did was, because I was still at CVS, and I was part of, I knew pharmacists, so if I was working Friday and I went in on Saturday and saw my other partners, they say, hey, how was your day? I tell them what I'm doing. And they go, wow, I'd love to do that. So really the outreach, the marketing was not. It was just all I had to do was tell someone what I did and they wanted to do it,
Yeah.
which made me very, very interested, not to start a new company, because at this point I'm 60, some odd years old. I'm not looking to start a company again. I'm looking to spend more time with my grandkids.
Right.
So I said to all these interested, passionate pharmacists, hey, I have a little bit of a marketing background. I spent 27 years in consumer electronics. I'll create a brand. I'll create a platform. I'll create the resources so you could do what I did. And that's what happened. So we have a very supportive, passionate, driven group of pharmacists and students of pharmacy who have taken RXVIP and the concierge approach and taken it now on a national basis to the point that we've been partnered up with one of the largest technology providers of wellness and technology so we could be scalable and put a pharmacist in every physician office across the country. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. So what I really like about this story, and your story in particular, is you start out, you want to help people, and I don't think that you're sort of Robinson Crusoe in that respect in a pharmacist position. I think that's what everybody does when they go into the field. But the personalities, in my opinion, the pharmacists, that I've met over the years, there's obvious set of intelligences that are required for the position. Okay, you can't go into the job if you don't have some capacity to retain information. You've got to be able to follow protocol. You've got to want to help people. But I think that the pressures of the market that are interesting right now is the strengths of intelligence that a pharmacist have of being able to learn and have their nose in a book almost distract from the job that you did when you were in consumer electronics, right? Doing sales, right? If I just put my nose in this book and I remember all this stuff and I'm great at chemistry and I'm great at science, maybe I won't have to do sales. Maybe I won't have to deal with these folks too much. But then you graduate and you go into the field like a regular pharmacist would, and that's exactly what you're doing. But there's this longing, at least in the American market, to actually deal with a patient to the point where, hey, this is what I'm doing now. I'm talking to patients. I'm sitting down with them, and it's sort of concierge. And people, that's why they got there. That's why they took the job, is to help people in the first place. And it's very, very reminiscent of my college experiences, where I was interested in psychology. I studied it. And then I go to the market and I'm like, that's what they do? Ugh. How was the flip side? I had it totally backwards. But it's really awesome and exciting that the character of pharmacists are being used in a way that they love.
Right. And it really has resonated with everyone we've spoken to because we don't want salespeople. We don't, anyone who thinks that this is a sales position, they're missing it. If you stand at a pharmacy and a patient comes up to you and tells you they have poison ivy, and you recommend that they use Benadryl or go down the aisle and get, hydrocortisone cream, you really are recommending that they consider doing something that, based on your knowledge, you and your experience, you think will help them. There's no agenda. That person doesn't think I work for Benadryl or that I work for the hydrocortisone company and I'm selling them something. So what I've tried to do in our training, and that's one of the reasons why I really love when we connected. I think your learning and your ability to bring messages to other educate. You're an educator, and we're an educator, and I think there are synergies in the things that we can do together, because we don't want to teach people how to sell. We want to teach people how to communicate in a very in a very comfortable environment that they feel that you're there to help them. And it's much easier than you could ever imagine when you're not focusing on the dollar you make on that transaction.
Yeah, yeah. That's something that all the top performers that I interview have in common. They never care about the sale. but they make the most sales. So
Yep.
my job, I walked into the industry and I realized very quickly, like I had a background in sales, but also a background in cultural change. And so I recognize, taking my experiences from retail or door-to-door sales and sort of copy pasting them into pharmacy, this ain't gonna work. Like this is totally the wrong set of intelligences for these guys because they hate it. They don't even like the word sale. So I couldn't do that, and I realized I'm in deep water here. And so what I did was, well, who's winning? I go to the top performers. I say, what are you doing? Why are you so bloody good? What is different? And they say, look, I just give the best advice I can, you know. And Australian pharmacists, I don't know about the US market, but the Australian pharmacists are one of the most trusted professionals in Australia, but they are the most frequented health professional. And so you combine those two things, right? You combine very high level of trust, the most frequented health professional, and then you got these absolute rock stars of community health doing things that we want the whole industry to do. I was like, that's going to be hard to lose, right? It's going to be hard to lose that battle if I take the top performance methods and we teach everyone those methods that instill trust in the community, and that's the bedrock of trust is these people. I mean, we're going to have a win there. So I'm very ignorant. I'm very ignorant to the job, but I at least had the intelligence to realize that I didn't know, and I wanted to take what they were doing and distribute to the industry.
Well, perception, which you have, which is right on, becomes reality. Perception becomes reality over time. The sad part about it is everything you said in your market is exactly the same in the U.S. market. Highly respected, most frequently engaged healthcare professional. But the fact that we're not recognized as providers in the healthcare system in the United States is the biggest problem that we face. We cannot bill insurance companies for the professional services we deliver, so we continue to advocate for provider status. However, we're not waiting, because the word collaboration gets us past all of the challenges. For us to collaborate with physicians and be in their office with our PharmD resident program, where we put a pharmacist right in the office 1 to 3 days a week and compensate that pharmacist more than they make at retail, significantly more, will allow us not to wait for legislative reform, and will allow us not to struggle with the fact that there's no reason on earth why a pharmacist should not be a provider who gets paid directly by the insurance companies, the Medicares and the Medicaids and the commercials for their services. We shouldn't be asked to crawl around the floor at a retail pharmacy to make a living. We are healthcare providers. That's the sad part about it, Tyson, that they don't recognize what you recognize. Sad.
Well, it is sad, and I think I keep reminded of that scene in Jurassic Park 1. I don't know if you remember it. I think it came out in the 90s, where the genetic engineer says to Jeff Goldblum, "What are you saying, that the females will mate?" And Jeff Goldblum goes, "No, I'm saying life will find a way." So I think that reminds me so much of what you're talking about. Is like, so Australia's got these great rules that other bodies are trying to remove, and the US does not have the same regulations. But regardless, the patient care, the desire to help, the face-to-face, the consultant style is blossoming regardless. So I'm very optimistic. I mean, maybe I'm very guilty of thinking too far ahead, which is not a good thing. So maybe it's sort of 10, 15 years before this is commonplace. But it is encouraging to me that without supportive regulations, it's happening anyway. The market is supporting it. To me, that's great.
And I'm very optimistic because the next generation of providers who are being graduated in droves into our industry want provider status and are prepared to work in environments like this to prove it. They're willing to talk the talk and walk the walk. So when we do this PharmD resident program, we are inundated with requests for these next generation PharmDs to do what they went to school for. This is a clinical application that they cannot get in a retail environment, flipping burgers in fast food pharmacy. It just is what it is. So when we tell them and then they say, how much can we make by doing this? We say you can earn as much money as you want. The more patients you see and help, the more money you make. That's what a provider does. Dr. Goodman doesn't get paid an hourly wage because of their CPT codes and ICD-10 codes and billing encounters. So we're putting our pharmacists and our PharmDs and our students of pharmacy, because so many of the services can be provided under direct supervision, because we're in the office of that physician, by a pharmacy student. So we're giving them the opportunity to advance their career and to be paid as providers even before they graduate. So, we're creating a paradigm shift for the way a pharmacist can practice his or her profession in the United States. And we want to be in every healthcare environment that who would say no to a pharmacist being in their practice when it doesn't cost them any out-of-pocket expense, when we increase patient outcomes, when we increase reimbursement for them, when we address all of the performance measures and the MIPS and the MACRA and all the things that probably don't apply in Australia. But we're doing all of the heavy lifting. All we want them to do is say, here are some patients who we think you can help. Is that a lot to ask? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah, that's exciting. Now, to play devil's advocate for a second here, Ken, just because I know...
You wouldn't be the first, by the way. You wouldn't be the first.
Well, we've got a body in Australia called the AMA, and they really like to get all excited about any sort of progressive change in the market. And the latest stink that they're kicking up is that, pharmacists saying, look, we really want to help out. We're getting rising health costs. This is the Pharmacy Guild of Australia, and they're really just promoting, more involvement of pharmacists in the health process. We're getting rising health costs. We're getting aging population. Pharmacists can take some of the burden by having really benign things. Handle more vaccinations, things like repeats of oral contraceptive pill, and then the doctors, the AMA, which represents Australian GPs, gets all excited and says, look, if you want to be a doctor, go to school for 10 to 15 years. Okay, you're not a doctor, stop trying to take our job. So when you're telling me, I'm just sort of getting an alarm, when you're telling me that you're getting students who haven't graduated to fill this concierge role, how are you getting around that? I know you're very patient focused, so that's why I'm sort of interested how you're working that angle.
Do you use GPS when you drive around?
Yeah.
Okay. GPS tells you how to get to where you want to go with the best route, correct?
Yes, sir.
So we've taken a GPS approach by recognizing we are not doctors, even though we are doctors of pharmacy if you're a PharmD. We do not want to be taking away from the responsibilities or the role that the physician plays with a patient in healthcare. But as medication experts who went to school to study the medications, no one is better suited to work with that doctor to help them manage the medication challenges that their patients face every day. So what we've done is we've chosen the tool that allows us to raise the bar that no one else can reach, and that's pharmacogenetic testing. There's no possible reason that you should be managing medication for a patient at the physician level without knowing if the drug that you're prescribing is the right drug, the right dose for that patient. And the only thing that can do that is a simple cheek swab test, a pharmacogenetic test. We are advocating for it. We are a leader in pharmacogenetic testing. We have partnered with the leaders in pharmacogenetic testing to say, put that pharmacist in the box. Let that pharmacist review those results because the doctors are too busy or don't even think about using pharmacogenetics in their protocols, despite Mayo Clinic, Vanderbilt, Johns Hopkins. How about St. Jude's testing every patient? If a doctor isn't smart enough to think that this is a protocol that works, maybe the patient should see another doctor.
Right.
So we are using the GPS for pharmacists. And that GPS says embrace pharmacogenetics and bring that awareness to a physician's office to open up that door to all the other services. They don't need me to give immunizations. They hate immunizations. And guess what? The pharmacist hates it too, because CVS and Walgreens makes you, next year, I'll be the first one to say that flu shots will be given through drive-through window, with blowguns from CBS one day. Because do you know that they're starting like now in August with flu shots? They're challenging their pharmacists. They're going to give them an extra hours so that they could work harder to give flu shots. And one of my dear friends is still a manager there. He said, Kenny, I don't want 7 more hours to work giving flu shots. I got to go home. I'm dying. Anyway, PGX testing is the flu shot of the future. It will be a standard of practice. That's why we embrace it. That's our GPS.
Yeah, I agree. In pharmacogenetic testing, that's a DNA test that tests the genes against like certain, I guess, tailor-made medications or.
No, what it does is, Tyson, it would tell your doctor exactly what your blueprint is, how you metabolize a drug. If you and I take a atorvastatin because we both have, cholesterol problems, that 10 milligrams is metabolized different for you. That drug is metabolized different for you based on your DNA.
Yeah.
When you go to the doctor in I don't know, a couple of years, they're not going to ask for blood and urine. They're going to ask, well, do I have your genetic profile, Tyson, so I can treat you better?
Yeah, I work with a company called MyDNA in Australia. We just interviewed. They've got a really good education model too, where they had a pharmacist and she was really good at distributing the DNA tests on site in a retail environment, and they stole her. And now she works nationwide, educating retail pharmacists how to, interpret the results, how to show that it's a useful product. And I think it's extremely interesting. I think if you look at the history of DNA, I think they won the Nobel Prize for DNA, was it in the 50s or 60s? It's been a long time coming to the point where DNA isn't just a talking point in a conversation, right? Like you could say, the average person uses DNA as making a point. Carpentry's in my DNA. We've never had an actual application unless you're taking a paternity test or you're involved, unfortunately, in some sort of criminal activity where you have to provide DNA. And now we've got like the average consumer, right, has taken the $100 million cost of mapping the human genome down to $1,000 in the last 20 or 30 years, and now we're on site with a maximum $200-300 test where you can map everything out that's useful to your body and have tailor-made medication schedules for you specifically. I think it's got tremendous applications in research, right? You think about double-blind placebo-controlled studies now. They're not going to be just randomized selection. It would be randomized selection within the genome to have
think about healthcare costs, because that's what everybody does.
Yeah.
Eliminating trial and error. When 4 billion, with a B, prescriptions were written in the United States last year, eliminating trial and error would save the healthcare industry trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
Okay? By eliminating, how many times do you go to the pharmacy or the doctor and they give you a drug that just doesn't work and you get another one? Well, the insurance is paying for it. You're paying for it. Everybody's paying. Eliminating trial and error is cost saving. And what about adverse drug reactions? In the United States, adverse drug reactions last year put 2 million people in the hospital. That's a huge cost to the healthcare system. Sadly, 125,000 people died from an adverse drug reaction, making it the fourth leading cause of death in the United States, more than breast cancer. Now,
Wow.
we know about the opioid epidemic. We see it
Yeah.
on the news every day.
Yeah.
Opioids sadly killed 70 some odd thousand people last year. But you don't see any news on adverse drug reactions. They
Right.
killed 125,000 people last
It's
year.
almost double.
It's like being on an airplane. If I was going to fly to Australia and there were 300 people on that plane, and that plane crashed every day for a year, Tyson, do you think that the world would stop and that the FDA and everyone else would say, don't get on a plane? But no one's saying pharmacogenetic testing, which can avoid adverse drug reactions, is even a standard of care. Doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense to me.
Well, I think it goes back to, because I spent an hour with Tara Smith from MyDNA last month, and I think it's that thing is that DNA testing is etherical. It's not real to most people. It's, even I'm blown away with my own genetic tests. It's like, this is a real thing. Like, this is my real body. It's even hard to believe once you've done it that it's so beneficial to you. And I mean, I think you're right. I think in 5-10 years it's going to be commonplace. But DNA has been around so long that it's more of a conversation piece than a physical application.
Is this you're recording this conversation, correct? So it'll be
Yes.
memorialized. Well, I'm going to make a statement now. This is like a time capsule. We're going to bury this in my backyard, and we're going to look at this, not in 10 years, but I will make a statement today that hopefully won't come back to bite me in the butt. I believe pharmacogenetic testing is the flu shot of the future. I believe that this will become something as common as what's going on right now, people getting flu shots to maintain their health in that regard. The PGX test will come down in price dramatically. It's a commodity. It's a cheek swab test.
Right.
But what will make this powerful is having a pharmacist interpret those results for actionable changes in medication management. If you don't do that, that test is worthless. That's why we are positioned with the largest data analytics company, translational software, in the United States, who deals with over 80 labs and healthcare systems. It's not just the test, it's the interpretation and the action of that test. We have a call center that answers calls for the largest lab in New Jersey, who won the Frost & Sullivan Award in Mira Health, because doctors have questions. They're busy. They need to speak to a pharmacist. So we are totally engaged in pharmacogenetic testing. I'd love to speak to that woman who you interviewed. Let's bridge the gap. Let's talk. Let's talk the talk.
Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Tara. She's good. She's very good. So where can people learn more about your concierge service?
Well, you have our website up there. I've never seen it as nicely presented as I am right now. I have to tell my design people that they did really, really well. We are RXVIP and you can go and learn a little bit about just a taste of the things that we do, because we can't even keep up with upgrading the website as quickly as we're upgrading our ability to help people. We have PharmD resident programs, we have our call center, all of those things aren't indicated. But if you go to RXVIPconcierge.com and just contact us, tell us what you're looking for, and that email comes right to us, and we will be happy to connect with you. We do have a 844 number that works in the United States. I don't know whether that works over in Australia.
They'll probably go by email.
You could email is probably the best way.
Yeah.
If you wanted to reach me personally, because I feel personally connected to you now, Tyson, even in the short 24 hours that we've been engaged, anyone can email me at ken@rxvipcares.com, because we care about the patients and our profession.
I believe it. And you walk the walk too. I've seen it. You walk in the walk, and
I'm disabled from the neck down, sadly, with 4 hip replacements, knee replacements, and spinal fusions. I don't walk that quickly, but I have people around me who listen to my talk, and they do the walk. So we walk as a team.
Ken, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been wonderful to talk to you and learn about the service that you're providing. You're doing really good things, and we appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, and let's do this again some other time.
Thanks, Ken.
Have a great day.
Cheers.